welcome to the BPD Bunch brunch, where we get together with our favorite brunchy beverages to catch up, play games, and talk about all things BPD. I'm your host, Xannie, and today I am here with Rose Skeeters, who is the host of the From Borderline to Beautiful podcast and CBO of Thrive Online Counseling and Coaching. She has conquered BPD and wants the world to know that there is always hope. So, Rose, where in the world are you coming from? And what is your brunchy beverage for today?
I am coming from Southwest Michigan, right by the lake, and my brunchy beverage is raspberry pomegranate tea. It's in my favorite mug with my dogs and my son picture all over it.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I love picture mugs. I am coming from New Mexico in the United States, and I have got my own pumpkin spice coffee.
That's so cool.
So today, Rose is going to share some of her BPD recovery story and what inspired her to start her online BPD coaching business. If this or other BPD related topics interest you, please make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you do not miss anything. So first of all, I just wanted to start out and ask you, so how old were you when you were diagnosed with BPD?
That's a good question. So I wasn't actually told about my diagnosis until much later on, but I would say we can look at when I was 14, 15 years old. I was hospitalized for a suicide attempt and for self-injurious behaviors. So it all started then.
So you said you weren't told until later. Why was that?
I'm not sure. I mean, I was 15, so I'm 41 now. So many years ago. And I just think that wasn't as readily diagnosed as it is now. But when I was 14 or 15, I was hospitalized for, like I said, for suicidal ideation and a suicide attempt. And I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. And from that moment on, I was in and out of hospitals for years. And then I did learn about my diagnosis from a social worker who was instrumental in caring for me and my son when we were getting out of a domestic violence situation with my son's father. And so she had mentioned to me, hey, and she said it in a way that was like, oh, I thought you kind of knew this. This is a lot of the things you go through are in line with this diagnosis, BPD. But again, this is years later. She gave me some information on it, and that's where I was like, oh, okay.
So was she just like, oh, like this has been in your chart?
Yes.
Okay, so she inherited some papers from someone that said BPD, and just basically nobody had ever said this is what it was.
At least that is what my story says. Now I look back on it and I think the likelihood that they did tell me and I didn't listen or care to hear is probably high. Because as I was saying with the hospitalizations, like prior to the social worker, I mean, I was in DBT programs. I was in art therapy for people that hurt themselves. I was in the places where people with BPD go. I had different hair colors. All the things. So I'm pretty sure they probably tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I just didn't hear it.
I can super relate to that because I was actually working on the first few seasons of the BPD Bunch, and I called up my parents and I was like, so, I know BPD has been thrown around a lot and I've been diagnosed with it several times, but do you remember when the first time was that somebody actually brought it up? Because all that time I'd been thinking it was when I was 20 because that was what I remembered. And they were like, oh no, it was when you were in eating disorder treatment when you were 15. And I think it's probably similar to what you said. Like, I don't remember them telling me that, but at the time, I was so obsessed with my weight and my appearance and just all of my feelings that even if they did say that, I probably was just like, well, F you, you don't know what you're talking about. So I can relate to that. What were some of the major events leading to you seeking help and trying to figure out what was going on with you?
Yeah, so the first initial hospitalization, or the first time I felt that crushing pain of the big emotions or sadness, was when I had dated a boy. I met him actually in a Nickelodeon chat room, right when the internet first came out years and years ago. And so I met him and we dated all throughout my high school and experience. So it was my senior year of high school and he broke up with me, and it was just devastating. And that was my first borderline type behavioral pattern. It developed right then. So he broke up with me through a friend and a note that you pass in the hallway, before we had cell phones. So we were passing notes. I found out that he had cheated on me from this friend multiple times. And it was just a lot of like, I was very, like naive, a lot younger. I don't think that than people my chronological age. I don't think looking back that I should have been dating. So I think all of that's really important too. So I thought that this was like my knight in shining armor. And so it was really devastating to not only find out that he didn't want to be with me, but that he had cheated on me and everyone knew. So it was just like this moment where I was like, wait, everyone knows but me. And people were laughing at me. It was really just a kind of a devastating experience. So then I called him. And this is where you have, again, this is a time where you just have the phone attached to the wall with the cord. And I called him and his mom answered and he got on the phone and he was like, we're breaking up, right? Something very brief. And then I called him and called him and called him to the point where his mother had to unplug the phone out of the wall. I didn't know what to do. I was screaming and crying. So that's where when you ask about the diagnosis, like that's pretty much where it starts. And I remember like running downstairs and my dad held me, but I was inconsolable. And so that was a huge thing for me. I remember what I was thinking at the time, and then what led those events after that led up to more and more hospitalizations was I just couldn't believe that people could lie. To me right now today, it sounds silly, but back then, as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old kid who definitely had developmental delay and social skills, I just really could not comprehend that there was that level of evil in the world, that people would lie to your face, that he would say, I love you, and then he would leave me. And so I found all the music that would confirm and validate my experience. So it was a lot of dashboard confessional, like a lot of like boys with guitars crying. And so I felt bigger emotion and bigger emotion and bigger emotion to the point where I am now cutting myself because I'm so overwhelmed with emotion. And I go in the hospital and they're like, you don't need to be here, the whole you're fine. So I'm out of the hospital, but I still have this big emotion. So I spend from 14, 15, or I think it was 15, all the way through until I'm 30 years old, just looking for love in the wrong places, trying to change my body to make myself appealing and attractive for boys. I was also like, to be completely honest, I learned to lie myself so I can play around with guys, so I can mess with, that whole dynamic of, oh, I'm just going to tell you things and then leave you. Really just what I consider like socially deviant behavior. Even in college, everybody else was like going to class. And I was trying to find the boy that I would live with in the summer because I didn't want to go home to my parents. So it was just event after event after event. And from that, trying to be someone who is worthy, there's disordered eating, which turns into eating disorders, which turns into more cutting and more pain. And then I wanted to be sick because I found solace and peace in the hospital. So, I mean, that's really long-winded, but that's definitely, the events. There's not just one. There are so many events that lead up to, the diagnosis and me going, oh, I probably should, do something about this.
Yeah, you just said something that I can super relate to, the whole like wanting to be sick. I mean, if you'd asked me at the time, like, do you want to be sick? I would have said no, but I definitely remember that sense of like finding solace in the thing that like it's dysfunctional, but at least you know what it is. And I don't know about you, but for me, like the unknown was almost like intolerably scary.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just also, again, like social skill delay, I made friends in the hospitals. So there's a lot of different things. It's comfortable. I knew it. Like my development stalled at a certain point. And usually during 14, 15, middle school into high school, what people are doing is trying to figure out who they are. But I was trying to figure out why the world was evil, why people could leave you, why bad things happened. So my path splits So I don't have friends. I don't have deep connection. I'm rebelling hard against my parents. I don't think that anyone is worthy of trust because people leave, people reject me. So of course the hospital becomes a place where I want to be. I wouldn't have admitted to that either, but I would do things to get myself back there. I'm really open about that stuff. I remember faking a flashback in the hospital to extend my stay. I mean, I remember one of my friends who was in there was like, you know that we knew that that was fake, right? I was like, but they didn't. Just really sick stuff, you know? And I mean, again, I didn't do it intentionally, like nefariously in the way that I'm talking about it now, because now I had insight. Back then, all I knew is love me and take care of me and like, don't leave me. And these people can't leave me. They have to feed me. They have to get me up in the morning to get weighed. This is like eating disorder treatment, right? When you're like up at 5 o'clock in the morning for your weigh in. I mean, that all that stuff, it sounds, you know, odd, but I mean, it feels good to be loved so much that people are checking on you even after you eat, you know, to go on the bathroom, to go to the bathroom. So,
Yeah. So when you heard the label BPD, was that something, were you able to accept it, or what, like what was your reaction when you heard that label for the first time?
I mean, I didn't even react because I think somewhere along the way, I knew I was in a doctoral program for psychology at the time where all that was happening. So my life has like this really fascinating, like different levels. Because during even being in the eating disorder, I was still in college in the eating disorder treatment center, excuse me. I was still in college. And then I graduate college and I go to a doctoral program. And then throughout the course of this doctoral program, I studied hard. I got in, I made it. And then I sleep with the limo driver during a bachelorette party that wasn't even somebody I knew. It was my friend's friend. And again, it's just playing with reality like, oh, this should be fun and color my weekend. What? So then I get pregnant, you know, and then he's a violent guy, you know, abusive guy, and I had to get out of that situation. And so if you think about all of those events, I wasn't thinking oh, BPD when she told me it. And you know what I was saying is in the doctoral program, I have had this fascination with this woman who works. She's works in Philly now at the Center for Acceptance and Change, and she's a DBT therapist. Her name's Stephanie Matei. So if she's listening, she has no idea any of this stuff, which makes it even more hilarious. But I wanted to be on her research team. I wanted to work with her, which is why I wanted to go to that doctoral program. So her research team was DBT. It was people with BPD, and that's what she did. So I think I knew a lot more than I was like consciously making myself aware of. I just thought, oh, this population is interesting. I really care for these people. I didn't think I have this. So fast forward to when they told me, or when the social worker told me about the diagnosis, I was like, okay, like, how do I get out of this domestic violence situation? Because that was real. You know, there are things in my life that were made up, and there were things in my life that were real, and that was real. I was being, you know, physically hurt in the situation, and I was scared for the life of my son. So there were moments where, you know, I knew I needed to focus, and that wasn't what I needed to focus on because now I was a single mother having to go through court and a custody battle to try to protect my son and myself. So it wasn't really like a focus. The focus was get me through this, give me an advocate, let me get my protection from abuse, help me like figure this out.
That sounds like a really rough time. I'm glad you got out of that situation. So
Yeah.
then, so you got out of that. So then, at what point did you start actually focusing on, like, oh, this is a thing I have that I need to deal with?
I grew up a lot in that situation. Rock bottoms didn't come easily to me. I don't know. I think that that's something I feel like being hyperbolic, I could hit a rock bottom and then I'd be like, oh, I forgot, and hit another one and another one and another one. However, this situation with court and having a child, these were multiple rock bottom situations happening at one time that I just couldn't ignore. So I was still going to this program and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to finish it because I wanted to be a mother to my son. And when you're in a doctoral program for psychology, your time is really taken up by the work that you're doing. So the program wanted me to finish in a certain amount of time, and this is rules from the APA, and I would have had to have him in daycare. all the time. And I just wasn't going to do that. But I kept going to class because I didn't want to let go of that identity. Like I wanted to be Dr. Rose, again, silly things. And at the same time, having to try to find a job that would give me the income to support myself and my son in that lifestyle where I could send him to a good school. So all of these things are happening. But then I need to find, I'm still really broken. Right. So I find a job. I end up doing assessments for individuals with disabilities throughout Pennsylvania, and it paid well, like mind-blowing blessing. So I was able to rent a home for my son, custody, all of those things. My brothers were sweet and they helped me with the money I needed for a lawyer. So if you piece by piece, I'm putting my life together to try to mature, to figure things out, all the while knowing I was going to have to leave this doctoral program. I wasn't going to be able to finish. And so again, start, of course, like I'm lonely. So, okay, I'm working, I'm doing the program. Well, now I need to date, right? Like, of course I do. So then I started dating. And again, it just became more and more obvious. So I dated a guy who he was super happy in the summertime. It was great. We went to the beach. He had golden hair. He had a son. I thought this is wonderful. And then all of a sudden the fall hit and I went to go bring him some lunch. And he had carved an anarchy symbol in his arm and shaved off all his curly hair. And I thought, okay, like I have to do something differently because I just left this. I had this like moment where I just left this abusive relationship and I had stability and I couldn't keep doing that to my son. Right. So these were these like light bulb moments in my life that forced me to grow up because I wasn't going to therapy. Right. Like that's something also because I was very arrogant and I was like, these people can't help me. Years prior to that, I had had the treatment centers, multiple treatment centers. I had had DBT groups. I had had art therapists, dietitians, nutrition coaches, all these people. So by that time, I was like, I'm just going to figure this out. So yeah, very long story to then after that guy, after that dating experience, I was like, I'm going to date the most boring non-emotional man that I can find. And that's going to be my husband. And I'm going to pursue a husband. And that's when I met my husband. I hate to say it like that, but he's not boring. But at the time, he was nothing like anyone who I had ever dated. But basically, I meet him and he shows up for our first date and he's got this like brown drab shirt on, doesn't touch me, doesn't play in a band, doesn't have an emotional job. And I'm like, second date, yes. Doesn't try to sleep with me. So it was in finding him that I started to want more or want different. I'm not going to say more. I wanted different for myself, right? And as you can see, I'm like in the dark, feeling around to try to figure out what am I doing here. But he ends up being someone who holds me to standards. And he broke up with me. And it was devastating because I was like, no, this is my person. But he broke up with me because I was giving him heck because he wanted to get a job working with a woman, like stuff like that. And he's like, you don't think of me. You don't consider me. You don't, I'm loving you. I want to share this event with you. He had, made this beautiful dinner and it was like salmon and vegetables and we had some wine and he's telling me about this job. And I'm like, what about me? Like, are you going to be there for me? You're going to work with women. How many women are there? And they're all attractive women because he's a personal trainer. And so he broke up with me. And that was actually the moment where I was like, okay, there's something wrong with you. Not the diagnosis, not the years of therapy, because again, this is years. So I'm 30 when I'm telling this memory. I have to look at my little timeline here. I was 15 when it all started. I was 30. So 15 years had passed and not one thing got through to me except this breakup got through to me. And that's when I started to be like, okay, something has to change.
Well, he's your husband now. So so
Yeah.
what happened? How did that change?
Edge of sea. Well,
yeah.
he has had his own traumas in his own life. He overcame a lot. His story is on my podcast. It's just Jay's story. And because of that, he is a very patient man. So he broke up with me once. We actually broke up twice. I'm trying to remember the timeline of it. And then So he breaks up with me the first time, and then we get back together, and then it's just messy again. It just is messy. I mean, a lot of really horrible episodes happened. The second time we broke up, we were in kayaks, and it was a double date. His friend was with us with his girlfriend, and I was in the kayak having an episode because I thought he was checking out his friend's girlfriend. Meanwhile, my son was at home running around the house with the babysitter, and the pull-up bar fell on his head, and he was at the hospital and needed to get staples, and I'm sitting in this kayak having a tantrum. Like, I mean, obviously, when I got back to shore, I had my phone and I went to the hospital to go take care of him, but he broke up with me that day because he was like, this is just not normal. And it's not normal behavior. So then I didn't hear from him at all. There was no possibility of getting back together. He actually broke up with me in a text message. So luckily he's my husband now, but I was in class. That was at the time where I finally submitted to like getting a master's, moving on with my life. And I was in class and I drove home from class and he was standing in the driveway and I was like, how am I supposed to like leave you? And he was like, you just get in your car and you drive away. I was like, okay. And I did it. It was the first time in my life where I knew I was wrong. I knew clearly he did nothing. I knew he wasn't leaving me because he was leaving me and he was a bad person. And I knew that I had to do something differently. So I was real sad, not what I would consider borderline sad. I was real sad. And like what I mean by that is I wasn't in an episode. I was just genuinely devastated because I had had another situation where here I am like a single mom. I just thought you're going to be alone forever. So I started doing things differently. As much as I knew, I started trying to treat my son better. I treated him well, but I was a little kid raising a little kid. So if I didn't want to make dinner, we went and we had frozen yogurt. And he would brush his teeth. She always tells the story. He would brush his teeth and then he would go to the fridge and open the fridge and put like Hershey syrup and whipped cream in his mouth. I mean, just things that a 2 and 3-year-old just shouldn't do. And so I stopped doing that because I had been with Jay a long enough period of time that he had said, hey, like vegetables are good. Structure is good, routine is good. So I started to move my body and work out and eat healthy. And I would just Google. I didn't go to therapy because I still at this time was like, for what? Nobody's going to fix me but me. So I started Googling how to be normal in a relationship. Why am I not normal? What's wrong with me? How to handle emotions. I would drop my son off at school and I would go to a little state park where I felt like I could breathe. I felt peace in nature and I would run, sprint at the speed of my thoughts and I'd cry. And yeah, that's how I figured it out. And 6 months or so passed and I was going to date again. I prayed a lot too. That's pretty important. Every night I prayed. I didn't, when you're at your rock bottom, you're going to do things when the plane's going down. So I grew up Catholic, but I was atheist. But I just decided I would pray the rosary every night. I went to bed at 9 o'clock and I was really broken, I think is what I'm saying. I was broken down. And so then I had a date 6 months after he had broken up with me the second time. And I was supposed to go, I went out to the city and I was supposed to go on a date with a guy and it was a Sunday at 1 o'clock. And Jay happened to email me and ask me if I wanted to hang out at that Sunday at 1 o'clock. So I was just over the moon. And when we went to walk, the whole time we went for a hike and I was saying to myself, just shut up. Just don't speak. Just be chill. We've been together ever since. There were lots of ups and downs between then and now, but that was really the beginning of me listening to myself when I said, have self-control, listen to him, shut up, don't speak. Like, not mean. I wasn't degrading to myself, but I always say like my inner parent needs to tell me to knock it off and sit down.
Wow, so if you had to quantify like loosely, how long did it take you from sort of the onset of BPD symptoms to like living in a recovered state?
15 years. That's how long it took me. 15 years. And then it took me 4 years. 4 years to conquer it. 4 years. And I say it is like empathy is one of the biggest recovery deterrent factors, cognitive empathy. So it took me 4 years to comprehend the idea that other people's feelings matter and that I had to really start to understand how to stop putting people in boxes and how to start loving them and start loving them in a way that didn't just honor what I wanted. Excuse me, that took 4 years. And it's going to take the rest of my life to continue to consciously love other people well in that.
That's just for anybody watching, not that it always takes that long, but just so that if if you're in a place where you're really struggling, like, it can take a long time, but that's okay.
It can, especially if you're out of your teenage years, I do think if there was like some sort of parent education program and I could have been protected from dating, I needed more time. I needed 3 or 4 more years of development before being let out into the world. I probably wouldn't have taken that long. But because I had had that traumatic experience and was deeply impacted by that, what to me was a traumatic experience, I mean, I wasn't listening to anyone, and therapy was a game. It was a game to get people to love me. And so that's why it took so long. So I do want to say that when I hunkered down and like submitted, radically accepted the world around me and radically accepted the moment and the diagnosis, it took me 3 years and then an extra year because my husband said, I will not marry you if you cannot think of me. I cannot marry someone that cannot have my back, that cannot be loyal to me. And he was right. I couldn't. So then it was a really big year of like, okay, I need to like study this every day.
So are there any specific methods or therapy modes that you found the most helpful in your journey?
The things that were the most helpful in my journey were, so one would be schema therapy. That's a huge one. Some of the modules of DBT were super helpful, like the distress tolerance module. I did use sprinting and intense exercise to decrease those big emotions. What I now know is called mentalization, is what I had learned at the time. These are not things like therapies or treatments I was doing. I didn't have treatment, but I had treatment. So I was pulling on the things that I had learned. So it wasn't just kind of me doing it. And then like a lot of coaching, the things that resonated with me during the 4 years where I was radically accepting the moment were actually people who had like, I will speak for in I statements. I just don't think that my breakup is as traumatic as someone's legs getting blown off. So for me, like it was traumatic to me. I'm not invalidating my own trauma experience at all. I'm just saying it clicked for me to listen to stories of people who had been in war situations who were able to then live life. So there's a lot of people who do coaching, and those coaches, they resonate with me. And it was a lot of like Navy SEALs, Tony Robbins and Chloe Medeiros coaching was a big help for me. And then just Jay himself, having someone in my life like that who had suffered in the way he suffered for so long and so many years. I mean, it was just those are instrumental things. Having role models is another way to say that. Yeah, strong role models.
It's challenging because obviously there's a lot of things that changed, but if you reflect back on your story, what do you think was the most dramatic change for you from who you were to who you are now?
My ability to love people. I didn't care about people. I couldn't care about people. I was too emotional all the time. I thought that people should care about me, and people left me. And I'm always fascinated. Well, not so much anymore, but in the beginning, when I first learned empathy, it did fascinate me that I could think of other people. And to even like know what that meant, it fascinated me. Humility became fascinating to me. This concept of like laying your life down for someone else or giving up what you think you deserve for someone else. I always thought that was like the weakest thing that you can do. And I associated like people pleasing with humility. I associated like, I thought that if I'm humble, won't you then take advantage of me? When will my needs ever get met if I look outside of myself and try to love you more? And it's like, so that's the thing, that really, I'm not that person anymore. I really, truly love other people. And I can even see it with my son, my relationship with my son. His life trajectory is all evidence of that. So there was this period where he struggled because he had me as a mother for, the first 7 years of his life were pretty tumultuous. I'm sure it's not easy to be the kid of a parent who's all over the place, bouncing all over the place, off the walls. I was impulsive. I was sometimes happy. I was sometimes not. And then I met Jay, and then we move in with him, and we're moving, and there's not stability. So then you can see him now, and like I'm blown away by him. When we moved here 4 years ago, he couldn't even write in a notebook because, he wasn't writing. So I homeschooled him, and like we've done a lot of work of like, this is how you feel your feelings. This is what a big feeling is. This is how you focus your mind. We love you, we nurture you, that kind of thing. So those are the things that I'm just not the way that I was before. I am just a completely different person because of that empathy.
So, can you share a little bit about what your business is and what inspired you to start it?
My business is an online counseling and coaching business. So I do telehealth with individuals both nationally and internationally. I'm a nutrition coach. Jay is a personal trainer. Jay is a mindset coach. He does coaching through that Tony Robbins, Chloe Medanis program. That's his style and approach. And I do work coaching work mainly, with individuals with borderline personality disorder. And that is the business in a nutshell of Thrive. I have 5 or 6 years of doctoral level psychology training. I did all but the dissertation and the internship that you go away to do. And I have, a master's degree and a license in therapy, and I love it. So I knew that's my trade. That was my career. So with people with BPD, it's when you launch an online business, you have to get people to find you, and therapists are everywhere. I had taken this course on a master's course on how to grow a business, and they said you needed a niche. And I said, well, this is my niche. These are the people that, come to me that I feel like I'm able to help, and I love helping. And that's how that happened.
Did you start your podcast before your business?
My business started before my podcast. My podcast came as a way my business wasn't really like, no one was going to the website. So that's when I started the podcast, which was like a huge leap of faith, because to start a podcast and say, I had BPD as a clinician, having gone through the level of school that I went through, that was a scary thing for me.
What was the reception like from like your audience or people around you?
I mean, it was great. I'm intense. So my podcast is intense, and the way that I recovered is odd, definitely like can't say when you ask the question about therapy, I'm like, well, I told myself to shut up. Like, so there's, a lot of the episodes are honest and a little bit intense. And so there are mixed reactions from people. For sure. I mean, the therapists and the clinicians that were in the class who were also trying to start their own group practices and online businesses, they were like, I think you're really brave for doing that. They were very supportive. And, the people that I know now, they're very supportive of what I do.
So, what was the biggest challenge in starting your coaching business?
Yeah, I think just putting myself out there. I knew my journey with therapy and counseling and all the things, and I knew that I wasn't okay with working with someone who didn't understand me. I just didn't think that was like a roadblock that I had. Like, if you don't know what I'm going through, how can you help me? Because I'm different than you. And, I am different than other people. I do have a hyperbolic temperament. So there's like truth to that. So I thought if I could tell them what I was doing in the deep depths of the despair that I experienced, then maybe they'd believe that there's the other side, because I'm on the other side.
I know that you're kind of a mixed bag, but what treatment modalities primarily do you use or have inspired your work when you work with clients? Like, what are some of the things that you draw from the most?
Yeah, it's a good point. I am a hybrid coach clinician. I'll always be a clinician first. So I run my coaching business as if it's a therapy business. I believe that there is a level of care that needs to be taken there. I pull from DBT, CBT, and ACT. So CBT and those third wave treatments, that's what I was trained in. That's what I know the most. And I think that they are highly effective. I also use a lot of motivational interviewing, schema therapy, and then MBT, mentalization-based treatment in the work that I do.
That's awesome. I really like that sort of mixed modality approach because, there's a lot of people who've had various experiences with particular modalities, and I think it's kind of neat that you can sort of adjust to the specific client based on what resonates with them the most. I should couch this next question by saying, of course, recovery encompasses a wide range of different things, but if you had to pick the top 3 things that you would say from your experience most people with BPD need to work on in order to achieve functional recovery, what would you say those 3 things are?
The first thing that I would say is the one that I certainly didn't want to hear, radically accepting some things, right? Like radically accepting, number one, you are different. I am different. I will always be different. I was born with a different temperament. I am hyperbolic. I'm kind of weird. I'm pretty intense. And I have got to be okay with that. I have to be okay with that because everyone is different. One of the things that I always laugh about in like at this stage is I thought that once I was recovered, that everybody else was normal. There's the like lack of cognitive empathy. I thought that everyone else is like chill and good to go. And there's encouragement in the fact that that's not the case. Everybody has problems, quite literally. Even people who you think have these great lives, they struggle and they have brokenness. So acceptance that you're different and not different in a way where you need to shame yourself for that, just different, period. And then working through what that means and trying to dig into what that means along with some of the other work that you're doing in therapy. I really think that that's huge because, having a hyperbolic temperament, before I got to this point, knowing my vulnerability factors, like my sensory sensitivities, knowing about my temperament, how it operates in the world, how it revs up like an engine and revs down, like all of those things were instrumental, in me like accepting the temperament. So that was one thing. The second thing that's key is buying into the idea that emotion regulation skills will work for you. They will work for you. I never thought that they would work for me until I was at the end of my rope life. They will work. The reason why is because when you're activated, your sympathetic nervous system is overactivated. You can turn off your sympathetic nervous system by turning on your parasympathetic nervous system. So it takes your brain's focus from the emotional pain to the physical pain. That's what we do when we cut. But yet did that, felt that relief, and still refused to believe that emotion regulation skills would work for me. So I want to encourage you out there. It's totally fine. I was in unwillingness for 19 years. I was unwilling. So, I totally get it. You can be as unwilling for as long as you'd like to be. It's just really key to know that you can absolutely learn to turn down the dial of your big emotions. And then the third thing is empathy. Yes, you are one of the most empathetic people that you have ever met. There are different kinds of empathy, though. I am a very emotionally empathetic person and always have been. However, cognitive empathy is a very different thing. And acceptance of the fact that you might need some support in that area will take you very far in recovery. Cognitive empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone's shoes, to understand that they have different mind than you, they think differently than you, they feel differently than you, and that they have a different life story and history and experiences that form their perception. And that just because they don't feel as deeply as you do doesn't mean they don't feel. My husband can feel sad, and his sadness is just as valid as my sadness if I feel crushing despair. So that kind of thing, that's something that drives recovery forward when you can begin to understand that concept that when your emotions are high, your ability to see someone as a separate person with their own perception of the world, that cannot happen. So learning that skill is pivotal for recovery.
Yeah, the empathy thing is a big one. I always thought, I was like, I'm a sponge. I take on everyone else's emotions. Meanwhile, if my emotions are always in my face, I'm not thinking about the other person's perspective at all.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any words of encouragement to our audience, anyone who may be currently really struggling with BPD?
Yeah, there's always hope. You can recover, I know that years ago, like when I started the podcast, BPD Bunch wasn't around. You guys are so great. There wasn't a lot of positive resources, and there is now. It's so much hope out there. It's a good prognosis diagnosis. So that's a word of encouragement. And if some treatment or modality or thing doesn't work for you, find what does work for you. It's like I said, what worked for me was parenting myself in a firm way. That was like a huge thing in recovery. That wasn't some gold star treatment. Now I love the gold star treatments. All of those things are great, but if they don't work for you, find what does. You can still recover. There's always hope.
I love it. What do you have going on in your business that you would like our audience to know about?
So in January, we're going to start another support group. I do support groups throughout the year. So if that's something that you're looking for a little more support, it is telehealth. It's about a 75-minute long group where we're working on all of the things that I talked about today, especially those 3 big things in recovery. And there's always the From Borderline to Beautiful community. It's a community of people that are driven in positivity towards recovery. We do cooking, we do a book club, we do stretching, we have a challenge, and we offer a giveaway every month for people who are completing the challenge, which helps with accountability. And my husband and I, we do live podcasts and question and answer sessions every week in the community. That's something that you can join if you just head on over to our website, thriveonlinecounseling.com, click on support groups to find out more information about our support group in January, or just click on community, and that's where you'll find out about the From B to B community. You can also work with me individually, but you can see that on the website too.
Awesome. Well, we will include all the relevant links in the description down below. So if you are interested in any of Rose's services, definitely check that out. Thank you, Rose, so much for coming to chat with us today. You have a really inspirational story, and I am just so honored to know you.
Thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
Thank you to everyone in our audience for watching. We hope you got a nugget of wisdom to take with you on your journey. We'll be back on Wednesday with a brand new topic, so we will see you next time.